You have been told all your life that wisdom comes from knowing more. More books, more facts, more experience. But what if the truth is the opposite? What if wisdom begins not with what you know, but with what you admit you do not know? This is the paradox that Socrates lived and died for. He insisted that the most dangerous form of ignorance is not simply lacking knowledge. It is believing that you already know enough. And if you do not see this, if you do not understand what ignorance really is, then you will spend your life mistaking confidence for truth and arrogance for wisdom. That mistake has destroyed men, broken nations, and blinded entire generations. Think about it. Most people fear being called ignorant, so they pretend to be smart. They repeat slogans, they cling to certainty, they avoid questions that would expose them. But here is the brutal irony. Pretending to know is the very thing that guarantees you will stay ignorant. Socrates warned his city of this disease, and they hated him for it, because to admit ignorance feels like weakness, yet he called it the beginning of strength. In this video, you will discover the hidden forms of ignorance that shape your life every day. You will see how they control not just your thinking, but your choices, your relationships, even your freedom. And you will learn how Socratic practice can shatter the illusion of false knowledge and replace it with a deeper kind of wisdom. By the end, you will know the first step that every man must take if he truly wants to be wise. Wisdom, Socrates said, begins with a confession. The confession that you do not know. At first, this sounds absurd. How can admitting ignorance be the starting point of wisdom? Shouldn't wisdom come from filling yourself with knowledge, from accumulating answers, from building certainty? That is what almost everyone believes. But Socrates exposed the flaw. He would walk the streets of Athens asking one question: do you really know? A politician would boast of his understanding of justice. A craftsman would claim to know the nature of beauty. A general would insist he understood courage. And Socrates, instead of offering his own definition, would begin to ask more questions. Slowly their answers would unravel. Contradictions would appear. The politician would stumble. The craftsman would fall silent. The general would realize his claim was shaky. By the end, they were left in a state Socrates called aporia, puzzlement. That feeling of standing on shaky ground, of seeing that your supposed knowledge had cracks running through it. This was not humiliation for its own sake. It was revelation. Because the moment you realize you do not truly know, you are finally ready to learn. That was the paradox of Socratic wisdom. I know that I know nothing. Not a declaration of defeat, but a declaration of honesty. The courage to say, maybe I am wrong. Socrates went further. He drew a line between two kinds of ignorance. The first is genuine ignorance. You do not know and you admit it. This kind of ignorance is innocent. It is curable. If you know you cannot repair a roof, you ask for help. If you know you cannot speak a language, you find a teacher. Genuine ignorance is the soil in which knowledge can grow. The second kind is false knowledge. You do not know, but you believe you do. You carry an illusion of certainty. You speak with confidence. You act with arrogance. You make decisions as if the foundation were solid, when in fact it is sand. This form of ignorance is not innocent. It is dangerous. It has led men to ruin, armies to disaster, societies to collapse. For Socrates, false knowledge was the real enemy. Because when you believe you already know, you stop questioning. And when you stop questioning, you stop learning. His method for exposing false knowledge was called the elenchus. It was not a lecture, it was a dialogue, a series of probing questions designed to test every claim. You think you know what justice is. Then explain it. Does your definition hold in every case? What about this example? What about that contradiction? The elenchus stripped away the comfort of easy answers. It forced people to see the weakness in their own assumptions. Most resisted it. Many grew angry. Some despised him for it, but the few who endured it began to glimpse a deeper clarity. And there was another layer. Socrates often pretended to be ignorant himself. He would claim to know nothing, to be the student, not the master. This was not dishonesty. It was a technique called Socratic irony. By lowering himself, by asking as if he were the one who needed teaching, he exposed the shallowness of those who thought they were wise. His role in Athens was the gadfly, the small, irritating voice that never lets the mighty fall asleep in their illusions. Annoying, uncomfortable, but necessary, because without that sting, the city would sink deeper into complacency. So what does this mean for us? It means that wisdom is not measured by the weight of the books you have read, the number of facts you can recite, or the confidence in your voice. It is measured by your ability to confront your own ignorance, to ask questions until the cracks appear, to endure the discomfort of not knowing, to strip away false knowledge until something solid is left. That is where wisdom begins. If you think this is only abstract philosophy, look closer at your daily life. Socrates was not talking about ignorance in dusty libraries or ancient academies. He was pointing to the habits of mind that trap all of us every single day, the illusions that make us believe we are wise when we are not. The first sign is what today we call the Dunning-Kruger effect, though Socrates had already seen it in Athens. It is the illusion of competence. A man knows a little and suddenly he believes he knows everything. He reads one article about finance, and by Monday, he is giving investment advice to his co-workers. He listens to a podcast on history and now speaks like an expert on politics. Confidence becomes a mask that hides a lack of depth. The danger is that confidence persuades. Other people listen, they follow, and they fall into the same pit. Socrates warned that confidence is not proof. The second sign is argument by slogans. Listen to most debates today, and you will not hear reasoning. You will hear recycled catchphrases. People shout simple lines they saw on a billboard or in a meme. But when pressed to explain what the slogan actually means, silence follows. At a family dinner, one uncle insists that freedom means one thing. Another throws back a different phrase, and the room dissolves into noise. No one is reasoning, everyone is parroting, and the louder the voice, the shallower the thought. If your reasoning is a hashtag, it is probably shallow. The third sign is blind faith in authority. A man in a white coat speaks, or a figure on a stage declares, and people nod without asking for evidence. The assumption is that a title equals truth. But Socrates challenged the most respected politicians and poets of Athens, and found that many of them had no more clarity than the average citizen. An expert's title is a starting point, not a conclusion. Without reasoning behind the authority is hollow. The fourth sign is the echo chamber. Socrates walked the city questioning everyone, but we often surround ourselves only with those who agree. In online groups, in political tribes, in social circles, disagreement is treated as betrayal. Step outside the script and you are punished, shamed, or cast out. Comfort replaces truth, and the more comfortable the chamber, the more suffocating it becomes. Socrates called himself a gadfly for this very reason. He knew the city preferred comfort, but he refused to let them sleep. The fifth sign is the love of easy explanations. We are drawn to simple answers because they soothe us. Why is life hard? Because fate. Why did the business fail? Because luck. Why are people poor? Because they are lazy. The story is tidy. It fits in one sentence, but it blinds us to the complexity of reality. Socrates never accepted the first answer. He peeled it apart, asked for evidence, pressed for contradictions, until the neat story unraveled. If it sounds too tidy, it is probably wrong. These signs are not harmless quirks. They shape how you think, how you decide, how you live. If you recognize them in yourself, do not panic. That recognition is the beginning of wisdom. But if you deny them, if you cling to the illusion that you are above these traps, then you are already their prisoner. Socrates never claimed that he was immune. That was his humility. He admitted that he too could fall prey to false confidence, empty slogans, blind authority, comforting tribes, and simple stories. That is why he kept questioning, kept examining, kept pressing, because the moment you stop, the illusion grows back. Look around your own life. How many of your arguments are slogans? How often do you trust the claim of an authority without reading further? How many times have you followed the crowd because it was easier than standing alone? How often have you accepted the easy answer just to stop the discomfort of asking? If you are honest, the signs are everywhere, and that honesty is where wisdom begins. Socrates knew that these personal illusions were not just private mistakes. They spread, they scale, and when they scale, they shape the destiny of entire societies. That is where we turn next. What happens when these small illusions do not stay small? When they spread from the dinner table to the assembly hall, from the office to the parliament, from a private belief to a public policy. Socrates saw this clearly in Athens, and we can see it just as clearly now. Ignorance in the individual becomes ignorance in the institution, and the cost multiplies. Look first at politics. A ruler who cannot be questioned is a ruler who cannot learn. If leaders mistake slogans for solutions, the entire nation suffers. Laws are passed on the strength of ideology, not evidence. Wars are fought on the strength of pride, not reason. The people cheer for the words they want to hear, and only later do they face the wreckage. Socrates warned that when rulers refuse to be questioned, nations pay the price. Now consider the marketplace of ideas. Ignorance does not hide in silence, it sells. Pseudoscience, conspiracy theories, miracle cures, all packaged with confidence and certainty. They spread because they are easy to consume. They promise clarity without effort, relief without cost. And the public, hungry for certainty, buys them by the millions. Ignorance packaged as certainty sells best. The media and corporations know this. Nuance does not go viral. Careful reasoning does not generate clicks. Bold assertion does. So the incentives reward the very opposite of wisdom. The man who asks questions is drowned out by the man who shouts answers. The culture learns to value speed over depth, certainty over inquiry, noise over truth. Even education, the very institution meant to fight ignorance, often reinforces it. Students are trained to repeat answers rather than to challenge assumptions. They memorize definitions, recite formulas, and pass exams, but they are rarely asked to examine the cracks in their own thinking. We graduate people who can pass tests, not people who can ask the right questions. Socrates would not have called that an education at all. These are not separate problems. They are the same root growing in different soil. The same false knowledge that blinds an individual blinds an entire city. Athens condemned Socrates because he would not let them rest in illusions. He forced them to see the cracks, and instead of listening, they silenced him. But history shows who was right. The city fell into decay, but his questions still stand. And here is the uncomfortable truth. We do the same today. We silence the questions that sting. We reward the answers that soothe. We protect our pride instead of protecting the truth. Ignorance scales because we allow it to. So far, we have seen ignorance in the individual and ignorance in the society. But the deepest danger is not in what we cannot see. It is in what we refuse to see. The ignorance we choose, the questions we avoid, the truths we bury. That is the next step, and it is the hardest one to face. Up to this point, we have talked about ignorance as if it were accidental, as if people simply did not know or did not realize their limits. But Socrates understood that the most dangerous ignorance is not innocent. It is chosen. It is willful. Why would anyone choose to stay ignorant? The answer is simple and brutal. Because the truth is expensive. Sometimes the cost is financial. A businessman reads a safety report that warns of flaws in his product. To act on it would require money, delays, accountability. So he chooses not to read further. He claims he did not know, but in reality he did not want to know. His ignorance was cheaper than his honesty, until the disaster came and the cost multiplied. Sometimes the cost is social. In a group that thrives on certainty, the one who raises questions risks exile. The tribe protects its slogans. The echo chamber punishes doubt. So people keep silent not because they believe the lie, but because the truth would cost them friends, status, belonging. Silence becomes the currency of comfort. And sometimes the cost is personal. To question your own certainty is to wound your pride. It is to admit that your confidence was misplaced, that your decisions may have been wrong, that your life may have been built on shaky ground. Many people would rather protect their pride than protect their truth. So they cover their eyes. They look away. They choose not to know. Socrates called this the deepest betrayal, because ignorance that is honest can be healed. You can teach, you can learn, you can grow. But ignorance that is chosen is a moral failure. It is complicity. It is the conscious decision to prefer the comfort of lies over the discomfort of truth. And once you choose that path, wisdom closes its doors. Not knowing is forgivable. Choosing not to know is betrayal. This is why Socrates never stopped asking questions, even when it cost him his life. Because he knew the temptation of willful ignorance was always there, in every man, in every society, and the only antidote was the relentless courage to face the truth, no matter the cost. If you want to move from ignorance to wisdom, you must resist this temptation. You must learn not just to see ignorance in others, but to face the willful ignorance inside yourself. And that requires practice. That requires action. That is where we turn now. If ignorance can be chosen, then wisdom must also be chosen. It does not arrive as a gift. It must be practiced every day in small but deliberate steps. Socrates did not leave behind a book of doctrines. He left behind a method, a way of living, a habit of mind that anyone can practice. And that method is still available to us now. The first practice is simple, but not easy. Each morning begin with the phrase, "I might be wrong." Write down 3 things you believe for certain, and then ask yourself why. Why do I believe this? What evidence do I have? Who told me? By putting a crack in your own certainty, you weaken the grip of false knowledge. Socratic wisdom begins not with a claim, but with a confession. The second practice is to carry with you a small set of questions. These are the 6 questions that Socrates himself would have asked in one form or another. What exactly do I mean by that? What evidence supports it? Could there be another explanation? What would someone with the opposite view say? What assumptions am I making? How would I test this claim? Apply these questions to the next headline you read, the next opinion you hear, even the next belief you repeat to yourself. Spend 5 minutes probing. You will be surprised at how quickly the surface cracks. The third practice requires another person. Find a partner and agree to perform a Socratic drill. One person makes a claim. The other only asks clarifying questions. No insults, no counter-arguments, only questions. The goal is not to win, but to see where the contradictions appear. Switch roles after 10 minutes. You will discover how fragile most of our confident statements really are. You will also discover the courage it takes to let your own beliefs be tested. The fourth practice is to keep what Socrates might have called an aporia journal. Each day write down one belief you are sure of. Then write what evidence would make you change your mind. This trains you to live with uncertainty. It transforms puzzlement from a threat into a teacher. When you admit what could change your mind, you begin to hold your beliefs more lightly, more honestly, more wisely. The fifth practice is to curate your information diet. Socrates did not have social media, but he knew that voices shape the mind. If you only listen to echoes, you will only hear yourself. Choose 3 sources that challenge each other. Read long-form analysis instead of short slogans. Unsubscribe from the feeds that trade in outrage and certainty. Remember, you can become wiser not only by what you consume, but by what you stop consuming. The sixth practice is humility made public. Once a week, speak or write about something you learned and something you were wrong about. Share it with a friend, a group, or even online. This simple act lowers the cost of being wrong. It teaches others that correction is not shameful but honorable. A leader who admits a mistake grows in trust, not in weakness. Socrates modeled this by admitting over and over that he did not know. When you practice humility in public, you turn ignorance into a bridge, not a wall. These 6 steps are not theoretical. They are daily drills. Say, I might be wrong. Carry 6 Socratic questions. Practice the elenchus with a partner. Keep an aporia journal. Curate your information diet. Practice public humility. If you repeat them, you will not become omniscient, but you will become wiser because you will have learned how to strip away illusion and face what is real. Let us try one exercise together now. Think of one belief you hold with confidence. Say it aloud. Now ask yourself, what evidence do I actually have? Pause. Write it down. Now ask, how could I be wrong? Pause again. Write the counterexample. Do this once, twice, 3 times. You have just practiced Socratic inquiry. Slow, skeptical, relentless. This is what it feels like to think like Socrates. Wisdom is not a destination. It is a discipline. It is not a crown you wear. It is a path you walk, and the path is walked one question at a time. The temptation of willful ignorance will always be there. The world will always reward slogans over questions, certainty over humility, noise over truth. But if you practice these steps, you will find yourself less seduced by false knowledge and more anchored in reality. And reality, Socrates reminds us, is where wisdom lives. We have walked a long path together, from the paradox of Socratic ignorance to the signs that betray us in daily life, to the way illusions scale into society, and finally to the practices that keep us honest. Now it is time to bring it all together. Remember 3 things. First, recognize the 2 kinds of ignorance. Honest ignorance is not a sin. It can be healed. But false knowledge, the illusion of certainty, is the real enemy. Second, learn to spot the symptoms. Confidence without depth. Slogans without thought. Authority without reason. Tribes without questions. Explanations without evidence. If you see these, you are standing on sand. Third, practice the 6 Socratic steps. Say, I might be wrong. Carry the 6 questions. Drill the elenchus with a partner. Keep your aporia journal. Curate your information diet. Practice humility in public. Do these, and wisdom is no longer a dream, but a discipline. Here is the affirmation to carry with you. Wisdom is not how much you know. It is what you do with what you do not know. Admit it. Ask change. So here is your action for today. In the comments, write one belief you will test this week. Do not be vague. Be concrete. Declare the belief and ask yourself, what would make you change your mind? If you dare to do this, you are already practicing Socratic courage. Socrates paid with his life for refusing to abandon the truth. You will not pay that price, but you will pay another if you refuse his lesson. A life of false confidence, shallow certainty, and illusions that collapse when reality arrives. The unexamined life is not worth living. The examined life is waiting for you.